Today, we gather in conversation to highlight the Visionary Awardees, to explain how policy plays an important role in how the education system is designed and operates, to showcase Detroit as a place where loving, innovative leaders are working to upgrade the education system into one that is future forward and holistically nurturing, and to get the scoop from visionaries about what is top of mind for young people and education advocates this school year. Angelique Power, President and CEO of the Skillman Foundation, will moderate this conversation for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we will open to Q&A. Please just come off mute to ask any questions at that time. And if you prefer, you can jot your question in the chat, and we'll do our best to monitor and uplift anything noted there. Angelique, thank you for moderating this conversation today, and welcome to our panelists, who are each Skillman Visionaries. The Skillman Visionary Awards were launched this past spring. Each year, the foundation will award up to 10 individuals who are transforming the education system into a more equitable model for all. Visionaries represent a mix of educators, organizers, policy movers, and other essential leaders working across Detroit education. Visionaries hold an equitable, future-forward vision for education, and their impact is felt at the system level, beyond one school or program. We've shared this video on social a bit, and hopefully you've all had the chance to see it. But we'd like to share it with you now, so please enjoy.
Detroit is a city of visionaries, a place where people are working innovatively and holistically to transform our education system. The Skillman Visionary Awards celebrates education changemakers and invests in the future they're building. Transforming the education system is possible, and it's happening in Detroit.
Hi, everybody. I am Angelique Power, and I'm so honored to lead the Skillman Foundation with our mighty staff and partners, so many of whom I see in the chat offering great ideas and in the Zoom room. We work with people from all walks of life, and we do so to ensure that every young person in Detroit has access to a dynamic and nourishing and well-resourced education inside of schools, outside of schools, in after-school programs throughout the summer and more. And we do this because we truly believe that a dynamic and nourishing and well-resourced education is an express train to self-determination for young people. And it is an express train to a prosperous future for Detroit, as well as for Michigan as a whole. We focus on people-powered education. That's the name of our strategy. And that means that basically we believe that folks that are most proximate inside of education systems, young people, educators, after-school providers, families, really need to be lockstep with folks that are working inside of policy and education advocacy organizations if we're going to change the game, which I believe we will. So I'm so excited to have these visionaries with us today, excited to be in conversation. Reverend Simmons is also here. He is another one of the visionaries that were awarded this year. So diving in, hey, Reverend Simmons. Today is the first day of school at DPSCD, and we're going to get into talking about education and ways to transform the system for young people with young people. But first, each of you were young people, are young people. I don't know. Are we still young? And have your own personal experience with school. So I'm going to start with you, Jenell. Share with us something that you remember loving about school and something that you would change.
Something that I really loved about school was the opportunity to be successful and to win, right? Like I was a kid who was tracked into like the higher reading group. You know, it was a place where I felt like this thing that I'm really good at, that maybe, you know, me reading all the Harry Potter books in one breath may not be the biggest thing, you know, in my house, but when I go to school, that is like really a cool thing, right? I feel like it was a safe place for me to really like unfurl and like be a learner and be curious and be supported and have adults and other people like really pour into me. So I really loved that about school, the safety and security that it offered me, right? And a great education. I'm a proud product of Detroit Public Schools. And I had some amazing educators, a major community around me that prepared me to be like where I am today. And that education like was invaluable to me. One thing I would change is the traumas. I think witnessing as being like I said, a proud product of Detroit Public Schools, like the first time I ever had a classmate be unalived was in the 7th grade. And we had known each other since the 1st grade. Right. And it was like really traumatic at a very young age. And I really wish for our schools and communities to be safe spaces, like I felt like, to be a learner, but also to just like exist, right? And to thrive and to grow. So I will remove some of the trauma that I experienced. Yeah.
Sirrita.
Yes, much like Jenell, I enjoyed the joy that school brought. Just being in, and am I lagging? Can I give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me? Okay, perfect. Just being in school and fellowshipping with classmates, learning. Teachers were the best part of the school experience for me. I had some amazing teachers growing up that really just instilled greatness in me that I still talk to this day. So that's what kind of made me want to become a teacher, just from amazing teachers that I had, and just meeting some of my childhood friends who, again, I still talk to today. I think education did that for me. I enjoy going to school every day. But unlike Jenell, I wasn't always good at school, especially elementary. I had an IEP, and I always tell my students who have IEPs too, like I have a PhD now, so my IEP had me get there, right? But I remember when I first had, started my IEP services, and I had got an award for, I remember I still have all my awards. My parents kept every single award I got, but one of the awards that I thought was a good thing at the time, it was called Beating the Odds. Like, I got a Beating the Odds award because I end up doing good, with the help of some of the services that our schools provided. But it was the beating the odds for me. So what that told me, instead of removing the barriers, you measure me up to them, right? So it was like I had all these things going on, and school was a challenge. It was hard getting to school every day. Transportation was an issue, but I still did well academically because I beat the odds. So those Beating the Odds awards, like, we're not expecting you to do well because you have IEP, you do this. No, let's remove the barrier instead of measuring me up against it, right? And saying beating the odds, like, now I see that award as like, okay, that was an insidious award. Now I know a deeper meaning, to where you didn't want to remove the barriers. You were giving people awards for still persevering through them. So that was like my charge, to like be the barrier. Now you have to be the barrier, the person that removes the barrier, as you saw it from growing up. So that's why I continue to do this work in education, to remove that barrier, because I think that's what education does a lot of time, is makes you measure up to white supremacy and the systems that our young people are forced to grow and develop in. So that would be my negative and good things growing up in the education system in America.
Thank you. We talk about that at Skillman, rather than having young people beat the odds. How do we all collectively change the odds, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think something that I loved was I had really great teachers. And even though I wasn't getting maybe the best education, they were trying to do what they could. And something that I would change is that I went to a school that when I was going there didn't have a lot of programs. So like I literally built the journalism after school program at my high school because like everyone was supposed to go into STEM, and I didn't want to do STEM. I wanted to do journalism. So it was something that I took very, very seriously, and I wish like I didn't have to do that, but like now there's like a really strong journalism group at my high school, so someone had to do it, right?
So, flashing back to today, what do you think, as young people are going into the class for the first time, are finding their lockers, as teachers are finding their rhythm and thinking about all the things they have to do outside of school, as after school providers are welcoming young people from their first day of school, as families are figuring out the morning routine with school and with work, and the schoolwork and the life work that all has to go together. What do you think everyone is carrying with them as they enter into this particular school year? And Juanita, we'll start with you on that.
Yeah, I think I mean I'm sure we've all heard like school was cut short today because of how hot it is. So I can almost imagine like people are going in, teachers and students and families, staff are just going in with like, oh, like what can we expect this school year? Because I don't think it was particularly a great start. I mean, maybe for my nephews, they think, yeah, they can come home early to play outside. But I think it's a lot. Definitely they're coming in with a lot.
Sirrita.
Yes, I do apologize for the background noise. Hopefully it ends soon. I'm going to close my window as well. I do apologize again. But I think at the top of people's minds this year as we enter education, it honestly depends on whose mind it is. I think when we think of young people, what's at the top of their mind is getting through the year. And I think as a person who supports young people and as an educator, how are we going to help them get through that? So is that supporting their mental health? What does that look like? I think elections are at the top of their minds because that can change the trajectory for a lot of students as the year goes on, where the election is in the middle of the school year. So what does that look like? Or where do we have to shift our curriculum because we no longer can do CRT? Like how is this going to impact our young people? And what policies are going to be put in place that's going to impact our young people and education practitioners as well. Like thinking about the people who cultivate these young minds, how is that going to impact them as well? So I think as we go into the school year, this is the first day. I've heard some great things. Again, the weather, the hotness kind of delay or cut the day short, but I think people are excited to go back to school, educators and students. So I'm just hoping that people in policy sees this, that education is thriving and people want to be in education, want to be in schools, and hope that we keep that energy and that momentum up throughout the school year by implementing policies that support educators and students.
Jenell, from the policy realm and perspective, what do you think is top of mind as people go into the school year?
Of course, I'm gonna piggyback and say the election was my answer. Absolutely, just fresh off the heels of leaving like the DNC convention and really seeing the energy that's being pressed through our country, but also knowing that as education advocates, we're all living through unprecedented times, but especially in the work that we do, right? Not only does the people at the top of the ticket, but even getting on a more nuanced level, the razor thin majority we have in our state house, which has advocated for amazing education budgets the last few cycles, fully funding special education, right? Things that really matter to our students in the classroom, right? Maintaining that majority in Lansing and even adding to that majority is on the top of our minds, and also school boards, right? These are the people that set the budgets for our districts, right? When we're talking about book bans, who are the first entities that are dealing with that pushback is our school boards. So I think we are seeing everything on a national scale and kind of feeling that pressure, but there's much more pressing seats and things happening on a local level that we need to be paying attention to that will impact what education looks like for us the next 2, 3, 4 years, right? So really just locking in and understanding we don't need to just turn out and get people engaged because of the presidential hoopla, but for the people that are, controlling their everyday lived experience as Michiganders and Detroiters.
Thank you. I'm going to stay with you on that point, actually, on the policy piece. I also want to say to folks that we're going to open up for a group conversation. I see and know the majority of you, and I know you all have things that you want to ask the visionaries, want to add to the conversation. So in about 20 minutes, we're going to open the floor up, but you can begin to put some of your thoughts or questions into the chat. Jenell, let's talk about policy for a second. So, I think we see in a presidential election, we see that everyone has a voice. We see that, you have to turn out, that it's like, you're going to place your vote, it's going to have an impact, but policy is actually like moving all the time. I think of it as like the chess game that's constantly being played, and we're these pieces on the board that are very much impacted by policies. And so you mentioned some of them right now. You talked about school budgets. You talked about curriculum, Sirrita, like what does that look like? So can you talk to us about the importance of education policy and give us an example, since you work with the teachers union, what is a policy where teachers weighed in? They sort of led the policy change that has happened.
Absolutely. The importance of education policy, especially on a state level, right? Because that is not a federal issue, right? Federal dollars do supplement and support education, as we know. But as far as what your school's curriculum is allowed to do, even the length of your school day, when your school day can start, all of these things are state level decisions. And like any other entity in politics, there are people that are pro and there are some people that are against, and then you have what we call the lobbyists in the middle trying to, and advocates and different other stakeholders trying to pull people in either direction, right? And I think when we think about educational policy, for example, one of the examples I'll give is when the students from Detroit sued the state for the right to read, right? And out of it came a $96 million settlement for them to have literacy initiatives in the school district in Detroit, right? But every budget cycle would pass and magically this money was not appropriated to Detroit students. Through great work, not only with our teachers, but also our community partners. I see Molly on this call at 482 Forward. Hey, Juanita and MEJC. We did awesome work coordinating between labor and community on going to Lansing and making demands and saying, hey, the students need to be paid out this money. And why was it? Because we gained that majority. Right? It's cyclical. We elect people who believe in the things we believe in. We have allies to kind of do the tussling in Lansing to make sure it gets done. And then we need the voice of the community, which is our teachers and our students, to come and say, hey, we've earned this money. We've won the lawsuit. It's time to give it to us. And so last year they were actually awarded the money from the lawsuit where we could sit down with community partners and say, how should we actually use this money in the community? So it's really important. What I always tell my members is that we need to elect our allies, people who share, and we love all forms of education as education advocates, but especially advocate for public education. Because when public education fares well, so does everybody else, right? Like when we say a rising tide lifts all boats, really education is supposed to be our great equalizer. So we need to take care of our public schools. So I just really feel like essentially in my role, what I love is that I not only get to advocate for teacher rights as far as their evaluation, their placement, things that I know as an educator were important to me, but also budgets. When crazy bills come up that want to ban CRT, or we have a great bill package from Senator Stephanie Chang to introduce a plethora of ethnic studies courses dealing with a wide range of minority groups, we can champion that and get that kind of pushed across in Lansing. So not only do we champion teachers, but we champion the right things for our communities. Because teachers are the best people. They're the best voice. They create everybody. They raise everybody. So being able to function in this role and represent them and the students that they teach is really an awesome experience. So yeah.
My mother was a public school teacher, and so she's like snapping from beyond somewhere at that. Natalie, I don't know if we're taking requests for future Let's Talk sessions, but I feel like there's so much more we could say about policy. And Jenell, you have so much insight. And there's folks on the call too that I think we could lean into, but even understanding school funding, understanding Proposal A, understanding what are the options? I think there's so many things that we want to, even unpacking the latest state budget and what happened. There's so many places that we could go together. So Sirrita, one of the, things that we say at Skillman is so important is that we don't just do stuff for young people, we do stuff lockstep with young people. And you do as well. That is like a hallmark of your work. And so can you talk to us about how young people, whether through like after school programs or life after high school, there's a lot of innovative ways that youth are weighing in on policy. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing and why that's important?
Yes, I've seen youth lately just advocate a lot for their education. I mean, like Jenell said, we saw with the right to read or the right to literacy lawsuit, right? So youth are advocating more than ever. They are not just sticking with this is the education that I was offered. And I think it's problematic that the zip code in which you live in has more to do with your educational success than your own willingness and wanting to succeed, right? So when we realize that and we bring youth in and ask them, okay, what do we need to do for your education system to be better? They are the experts as well as the educational practitioners, but we kind of miss the youth and having their voice. I think a lot of times we give youth voice, but we don't give them power. So I think we're doing a lot of great things. I've seen like youth on school boards, right? Youth in leadership positions at schools. That's great. And I think we need to continue that, but I also want to make sure that we're doing it in a very intentional way. A lot of times I've seen it as performative. Are we listening to youth and giving them power? Or are we just doing it as a performative measure? So when I think of like how we all can agree that mental health, we can increase the mental health in schools. We need more funding for mental health. And the reason being is like we kind of separate mental health from policy, and we can't. Healing is fundamentally political as it is clinical, right? So when we think about that and we realize that that's a very true thing, we have to realize there's policies and practices and systems in place that prevent our youth from healing, that prevent our youth from actually learning in schools. So when we realize that, because a lot of times I'm talking about politics and when it comes to education, and people are like, can we keep politics out of schools? Schools are the most democratic institutions in America. So how can we can't keep politics out of schools? Politics are the reasons we have schools, right? And the reasons our schools function in the way they do. But when we have youth at the center that are making those policies, they're the experts. They're the experts in their own learning. So when we realize that and realize that us as adults, I went to school, I've been out of school K to 12 for 15 plus years now. I'm no longer the expert in what youth need when it comes to education, right? So we should be leaning on them. They should have a very high voice in those meetings when we're thinking about policy. But we don't, because we don't see youth as experts. We don't see that they have it all together. And I'm always confused on why. How are adults the experts in youth learning and youth education? A lot of times it's not even adults. There's people who've never even been in education making the decisions about what goes on with our young people. You've never even sat in a classroom as a teacher, right? You haven't been in a classroom as a student in about 40 plus years. How are you the main decision making power and have the main agency in how this education system operates? They should be the main decision makers. They should have the most agency, because at the end of the day, it impacts them. And then it should be educators, right, and practitioners, and then people outside of that realm. If we don't do it that way, it's just not going to work. So I hope that we continue. I'm seeing great things, right? I have some close colleagues who are running for, school board. I have, people who are young people who are doing great things, but I hope we continue to create that space to where they're able to do so. Then again, it's not performative, but actually intention behind it.
I want to stay on this topic of elections because it came up earlier. You're mentioning it now, Sirrita. Jenell, you talked about the impact too. So Juanita, we do have major national and local elections. This is a two-part question. How can people find out where candidates stand on education issues? Often I think that other questions get thrown in the mix, and not often it's like that firm education piece. So how can people find out where candidates stand? And then whether it's the election cycle or not, how can people exercise their voice to reach school system leaders and policymakers year round?
Yeah, so I will first say, in terms of specifically and like, in terms of like our school board candidates, our youth have worked so good and hard over the summer to create a voter's guide. And so if you check out 482 Forward on Instagram, you can see some of the stuff that some of you may know Imani has been putting together with the youth on who and what we should be looking out for in a school board candidate. So definitely check out that. It's on our Instagram. And then I think that's such a really, really good question. How can you still keep that energy when, there's not like an election around or near just yet? And I'll say, connect with a local organization, do community organizing, join 482 Forward. We do this work all year round. And Sirrita and Jenell know we take the youth up to Lansing. We talk with our legislators. We talk with people who need to know, just like Sirrita said, that the people who are actually experiencing these injustices in school get their voice heard. And so the best way to do that is organizing, advocating, and come by to a 482 Forward YOC meeting. Come to like one of our events, and you can directly talk to one of our elected officials in these spaces, because like I literally like I'm like over here snapping because like Jenell and Sirrita said it best. Like these our elected officials need to know from the people who it's happening to directly how we can fix these problems. In fact, like they should be the ones in these roles, right? And so like how are we making that connection, and how are we creating that pipeline? So I'll actually drop this last resource in the chat. Hopefully everyone can receive it. But as we inch closer to elections, you can find some info on voting as well on our website. And so I think that'll also be a really good resource as we step in heavy into election season, with like also pledging to vote, and you'll be able to get follow-up info about some next steps to take. And like I said, our youth worked really hard on a voter's guide. It's currently being updated too. So stay tuned for some of the really good work that they're trying to like have us informed with.
Thank you, Juanita. Each of you, we mentioned at the top with Tyler that you're part of this inaugural cohort of Skillman Visionaries. This is a new program that we launched, and the idea behind it was that there's a lot of stories about what's happening in education in Detroit and in Michigan, and there's a lot of stories about Detroit. And often it's not like actual Detroiters that are telling their stories. There's so much innovation that's actually happening here, but it's not first and foremost in like nationally even in how people understand what's happening. So what we wanted to do was highlight a couple things. One, that there's actually a constellation of actors that are at work in an education system at any given time. And they are folks that, as we were mentioning, they're young people. They are folks in school, they're folks in out of school time programs, they are educators, they're parents, they are family members, they're civic actors all over. So we wanted to first show the constellation of people that are working on this, from established education advocate organizations, grass tops to grassroots. And then we also know that we wanted to signal to some of the visionaries that you have to keep going. You have to keep going, that we see you and we see the incredible work that you're doing. And that's really behind the Visionary Awards. And so can you share with us some of the innovation that you see, whether it is your own work or whether it's other work that's happening, but like, what are things that are innovative that are happening across the education system here that people should be talking about and they should know about? And it's a question for all of you. So Jenell, let's start with you.
Yes, absolutely. So I initially was a classroom teacher and a school social worker, and then I worked in the nonprofit space, running after school programming. And I always say like the 3 to 7 is our sweet space where we really need to step up and serve our youth. We don't save our youth. They don't need saving. They need to be served. So we step up to serve our youth in that 3 to 7, because I used to always say to my students, like, sometimes I spend more time with y'all than y'all parents. Because you got to think, especially as a working mom, when I get home at 5, it's homework, bath, routine, cuddles, bed, right? It's really a tight ship. And we really entrust our babies to the adults all day, every day. And when you create a space for our babies from 3 to 7 where their parents are maybe working and in transit and just trying to get the household together, you really can create safer, better communities, more skills for our students, etc. So I used to work at St. Detroit Play Center, and I felt like from when I started in serving, the after school youth space, right, there was a few people like us, Detroit Boxing Gym, Boys and Girls Club was doing their thing. And then I feel like it has just exploded, right? I see the expansion of like the PAL programs. They were at the time building, the park on the corner, right? The corner ballpark. And then I've noticed like Detroit Boxing Gym exploding. There's the racquetball spot, like down on Outer Drive. Like, I think that is such a beautiful thing because schools come with laws and they come with all these requirements. The 3 to 7 space, you could really create student-led spaces that bring them joy, that educate them, that feed them well, really be that extra layer of love that they need. So I love seeing all the innovation across Detroit with servicing our babies after school and making sure that we keep their minds busy in a constructive way. And I feel like I saw kids do Lego robotics, football, like all the typical things, but really art, like all of the things that you can imagine our children in the city needing to have access to, getting the access. I just think it's so amazing and it makes me so excited. I always tell people, like, when I ran after school program, that was my dream job. That was my sweet space, right? But I'm really glad to see that keeps growing and servicing our babies.
Shout out to Fred Hunter, who is with us, smiling, beaming from PAL. Sirrita, jump in.
Yes, I love PAL. My son was in PAL. But yeah, shout out to what Jenell said. I echo everything that she said. But I've seen some great innovative things, both outside of school and inside as well. Like Juanita said, like when Juanita didn't see the journalism club, Juanita made one, right? I see that so much. Like we don't have this. We're going to create it because this is what youth want. And youth will go in and organize and they will be the creators of it. They don't wait to the teachers or the admin to do it. And I just love that about our young people. Like they are very go-getters. They are executioners. Like they want an idea, they will plan it out and execute it fully. And we have no choice but to listen because Black youth in Detroit, or youth in Detroit in general, they're brilliant, right? So we have to listen to the brilliance. And I'm just going to do a shameless plug. Some of the innovation I've seen is my young people of DHD. A lot of times their innovation is kind of too much for me. In my ADHD, I'll be like, come on now, let's hone it in. We're trying to do a lot here. But I'm the strategic organizer, executive director on paper, right? Because we know not how nonprofits work, but they will say I'm the strategic organizer. If they tell me they want to do something, I'm going to make sure it happens. A lot of times I may be like, y'all think that's going to work? I don't know. But our whole organization, just being a youth-led org, a lot of people didn't think that was going to work, right? And this is what becomes possible when we give young people the tools they need to solve their own problems. So the youth curriculum, the Healing Justice SEL curriculum that we've been developing, we're in the second iteration of, that is a fully youth-led curriculum. So I'm a firm believer. I don't know if you all read the book, Never Work Harder Than Your Students. I was always that believer. Like, I'm not going to work harder than you all. You are the experts in this. So I would have students teaching the lessons versus me, and I would be the student. And then that would, for me, would be like, let me put myself in a student perspective as well, so I can better my teaching as well. Like, how are we doing this, right? But I think when we think of like healing, right, and well-being and SEL, you should be co-creating what that looks like. They're the experts in their own healing. It's not adults. So we were very intentional about, these are the healing circles you all created. Let's turn this to a curriculum, because I've done a lot of research on SEL and it hasn't been done correctly across America. So we are now building that framework of how can we do SEL effectively with the youth-led lens. So youth are at the forefront. The adult is removed, so authentic youth healing couldn't take place. For me, that was just mind blowing when they was like, yeah, let's do this curriculum. And I'm just like, okay, being an educator, I'm like, okay, let's do it. I don't know how this is gonna work, but let's do it. And when we finally did it with the greatness of Silver Moore, who's also a visionary. I don't know if Silver's on here, but Silver is amazing with the curriculum. I'm not a curriculum person. I just want to shout out my good sis. She developed what our young people had into a whole curriculum, turnkey curriculum for our educators, where there's videos, there's lessons, all the worksheets are done for you. So all the students have to really do is show up and heal, right? We gave them all the tools. So I think that's innovative, because SEL, when we think of healing, hasn't been done right. It became popular during the pandemic, and a lot of other things became popular. Like, we finally professionalized educators again. Like, once the world shut down, so many things became possible. Not every kid got a laptop, and now we're professionals in education now. Why couldn't that happen before? Why did it take a pandemic for us to put the humanity back in education? But I think now moving forward, the youth are putting the humanity back in education through their innovation, and that's what I want to see more of.
I appreciate the Skillman staff working overtime with links, but if we can find a link for Classroom Clapback, which Sirrita mentioned from Silvermore, that would be great. Juanita, some innovation you're seeing.
Yeah, I was actually just at a festival in my community over the weekend, called Southwest Fest, and they actually had a youth-led photography booth. So these kids, in only 6 weeks through the GDYT program, only learned how to do all this right now, and they're taking it into, they're trying, pushing for it to go into the schools. And I think that was like one of the more like recent like things that I saw like firsthand in action. Like I can't even work my phone camera. And these young people were like, "Oh yeah, like you gotta fix this, and then we're gonna get that printed, and that's connected to this." And then they were like, you need to turn this way because of the lighting. So if we don't have you this way, like, and I just think that is so awesome because like when I was in high school, those things were not offered to get carried into school. Those things were not offered to learn. And so it's this like it's a balance, right? Outside and inside school programming that I'm just like so happy and thankful for, that our youth are that have access to it. But I'm also just thinking about like how we continue this into the schools, right? And into the actual learning space. Because I want to see more things like this in our schools to continue the genius that our students are coming in with. So that's the top of the thing that I really wanted to share. Because I just feel like, dang, show me how to use a camera too. Like that's so dope. Um, but yeah.
I want to open it up to folks who want to ask any questions. You can feel free to come off a mute and join the conversation if you'd prefer to put something in the chat. And while we're waiting, I'm going to ask a question. Oh, Fred, you just came up. Join
Yeah.
us.
First, thank you. Appreciate all the insight and perspective. And Juanita, you just talked about the balance with in school and out of school. And I just love, everyone's perspective and strength in terms of what you see and how you communicate. So it's really adding value to me. So thank you for this opportunity. I wanted to, you alluded to it a little bit, Angelique, in terms of the school budget that just came through. And I'm just, curious in terms of perspectives, what do you think the biggest or maybe most important wins were for this most recent 2024-2025 budget?
Jenell, why don't you kick us off, and then we'll go around to you, Juanita and Sirrita.
It depends on how we frame the wins. I view our wins. We have wins for our members and educators, and there's also the wins for our students and our communities, right? And I think again, we saw a massive infusion into districts from returning the tax that they used to pay on retiree healthcare, right? A system that was closed in 2012 and many teachers can't access. So a win for our teachers was they were paying a 3.5% tax into this system and they could not utilize the healthcare. It was kind of funding the system to keep it open. So our educators got 3% back into their checks, right? Which is awesome. A 3.5%, not a raise, but just money back is a beautiful thing. But it also put 5.75% back into the districts, right? It's a total of 7% that we hope to get some permanent legislation to scale down over the next few years to meet that 7%. But it'll infuse our districts with a lot more free money to move around to hire staff, to make sure necessary materials are there to educate our students. So we're really excited about that. But we also loved seeing that special education and at risk were funded abundantly yet again. And we're going to continue to work and have another supplemental budget to support mental health and school safety, because we did have a lot of moving pieces in this budget and not being as much revenue as we've had in previous cycles. But really still working with what we have on the balance sheets to meet those needs for schools and the communities. But the biggest thing is those percentages from the retiree healthcare being just pure money coming back into the districts, along with still funding all the great things the last few budgets have done as well around like at-risk and special education, English language learners, rural school districts, transportation, all of that good stuff.
Juanita.
Yeah, I just want to like echo what Jenell saying. Like I think some of those wins are really positive, and I think one thing that I really wanted to talk about when I first heard you ask this question is that a win that I wanted to see or that I would like to see. And that's how we invest more into the schools, right? And how we're investing in to our school facilities. I think a big campaign that we're working on at 482 Forward, created and thought of by our youth, is that the way things in our schools need funding, yes, that's important, but we need overall funding into our school facilities. And so how do we navigate that into funding? Because right now our school facilities are not getting anything. And so I'll say this, I'll end it on this. I'm looking forward to that win. Maybe not in the next year, but we're working towards it really hard, and maybe, but I want to see that win. And so that's what I'll share on that.
Sirrita, do you think you can share a win? I'm reading the side eye.
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything Jenell and Juanita said. Yeah, they increased at-risk funding. That is amazing. We needed to do that. The retirement, that was great too. But the decrease in mental health, I don't know. I don't have a lot of positive things to say. So I'm gonna keep it short because that was it for me. Because people know how much of an advocate I am for youth mental health, and I'm gonna take the good with the bad because we did increase that at-risk funding. But it's like, how are we increasing the at-risk funding and not supporting mental health? We're only solving half of the issues. It's like, that's not like that's like an oxymoron. Like, what are we doing? So I just pray we get it together. I pray that the next politicians really do right by our young people. I think we did some great things for educators with this new budget, but I want to make sure we're doing right by our young people, and that starts with supporting their mental health. So I'm hopeful. I would say that I'm hopeful.
I also want to add, Fred, in particular, this might be of interest to you, but the last 2 years, for the first time, there was money in the budget for out of school time. And so there was 50 million one year, 50 million the next year. This budget had 75 million. And so this is an all-time high for that type of support, which we're cheering for also. Omar. I think you're muted. Okay.
Yes, I am. I apologize. How are you? Thank you all so much for sharing your perspectives and thoughts. My name is Omar Hakim. I'm the executive director for Detroit PBS, it's education team. And this is my first year in this role as a nonprofit organization. And I'm joining this organization after serving about 18 years in schools. So I've done everything from being a parapro to a teacher, and then most recently a principal. And student voice was always at the heart of my interests, both professionally and academically. My dissertation work was around youth voice and coming up with systems in schools to help teach students what it means to be involved in school and uplift their voices. I joined a space, public media, that is hoping to build their identity in the education space so that we could bring our assets to schools. And they need educators and people who understand what is happening in schools to be able to do that. So I hear you talk about the nonprofit experience and background. Where else do you see support from nonprofits or other industries that you think can be could be a good resource to students and to youth that are trying to uplift their voices? Because we know that schools can't do it alone, right? They need help, especially when we know resources are limited. So I guess how do we get to work better as nonprofits or other agencies outside of schools to help support the work of uplifting youth voice in our communities? So thank you.
I feel like, Sirrita, you are the expert here, but Omar, I just want to say from the foundation perspective, we had the same realization that we are in service to young people, and yet we did not have young people at the table. And so for the past few years, we've been really trying to flip the script on that. We have a youth council that they make grant making decisions. They, they meet with policymakers. They weigh in and learn about Skillman strategy. And we have 2 Gen Zers that are on the board now. And so, one of the things that I talk about is like, even these efforts are pretty minimal, actually, in terms of like all the things that you could do. And a lot of what I'm realizing is like an organization has to really be ready to not just have young people at the table, but to be checked by young people, because if they're at the table, they are going to check you left and right. And to actually, I don't remember who said it, but not just like a voice, but like a vote and the power to actually have input. So, I mean, I think you could start right away with what you're doing, but then I also think it's a process for an organization to learn. How do you have an intergenerational collaborative? How do you do youth-led work that's genuine, that's gonna, turn things on their head? But Sirrita, you know best here.
Yeah, I don't know if I know best, but I can definitely chime in. So with I'm going to say a little piece. With our curriculum, we start with training the teachers first. So you have to go, we have a trainer model for you, but we have to train their teachers first. Why? Because if there's not teacher buy-in on this, it's not going to work. They're going to do more harm than good. So we have to make sure the teachers are on board with having youth have this power. And that means you have to give up some of your power so that the youth can have power. A lot of people don't want to do that. When we think of the teaching force is 80% white women. We don't want to interrogate whiteness. Any teaching or pedagogy that's not interrogate whiteness is inadequate for me. When we think, especially if you're in a predominantly Black and brown, institute teaching mostly Black and brown youth. But I always tell teachers, I'll never forget like this meeting when I was the only voice, right? The only teacher saying these things, even though I knew everybody else felt this. And then when we left the meeting, people were like, "Thank you for saying that. Thank you for sticking up." Stop talking to me, because your affirmations after the fact mean nothing to me, because when I was in there, I was fighting alone. I was saying those things and no one was by my side, right? So I always tell teachers, it's easy to scrub out me as an individual. It's harder to scrub out a movement of people saying the same thing. So when we create a movement, I don't think any one organization can do it. It's not. We have some great organizations in the room, but it's going to take multiple organizations to create that movement. So where we're saying we're no longer going to let youth not have a voice and not have power. We're going to stick up and making sure, like, collectively we're doing this, right? They can't fire all of us. So I remember, like, they can dismiss and fire me. That one teacher saying this, right? They can dismiss a movement of teachers and movement educators saying that. So my solution always to educators and practitioners is create that movement. You can now start that movement of people who are advocating for youth voice within your school or within your collective of organizations, to where you can't do it alone, because a lot of our organizations are grassroots, which means we're small, and with that one organization is not going to get it done. So that's my thing, is create that movement.
Juanita, you have worked with young people your whole life. You've been in the classroom. You have a youth-led group as part of 482 Forward. Is there anything that you would add to this?
I definitely would say that one thing, like just like 100% with Sirrita saying, but also I think a lot about how like if there's not somebody asking a youth, what do you need? Then that's like the first wrong step. Like you have to be asking that question. You have to be making sure that you're just not like also using one youth and assuming the rest for all of them, because they bring different things with them. They carry different different traumas, different ideas, different things that make them into who they are. And so we first need to make sure that it's not just like we're basing it off of one person or one collective group, um, but rather making sure that all the perspectives our young people bring with them is heard. And so I'm also thinking a lot about how like I think it's an adultism thing to just assume what you know best is for the young person. And that's the first also thing too, is never assume that. Um because it's also, I feel, a generational thing, don't just assume that you, from how you were raised and how you were brought up, you know exactly what this person needs, because it does not apply. You are trying to be accessible and inclusive, and you want to make change or support these youth in making change. And that's the first thing that you have to understand, is that like our young people are smart. Our young people know where to get things done at and how to do them. It's just a matter of resources and providing them with that space to activate and talk and be able to like voice that. So I think what we like to do at 482 Forward is make sure that our youth feel safe, feel welcome, feel like they can and be vulnerable. And I think that's how you begin to see that they're willing to speak and say things now that you are learning to not think inside this like structure of like how there should be an adult and student dialogue or something like that. So yeah.
I just want to circle back to end with some of the innovation that was mentioned and lifted, that 3 to 7 time. There are so many incredible things that are happening around Detroit. Some of the curriculum innovations that are happening from classroom clapback, but also things that we may not know about, that young people are leading their own curriculum change. Youth-led learning writ large is happening. And looking across the Zoom at so many folks that are working on systems change, looking at who I'm talking to here and beyond, I feel like we have the people. You know, what's the June Jordan quote? We are the people we've been waiting for. And so a lot of it is about the radical bridging of bringing us all together to get to where we want to be. Tyler, are you closing us out? I saw you come back. All right, I'm turning it to you.
Thank you so much, Angelique. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you to the panel. Very insightful, and you can tell from the response that you've been enlightening to folks. And this is such a necessary discussion. We are the change, right? Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Just want to shout out that this will be posted on our website within the week. We'll also share it in our newsletter, which will go out this week, and we'll drop the link to subscribe to that if you want to do that as well. And you can also visit the Visionary Awards homepage to learn more about the Visionary Awards here at Skillman Foundation. Anything else from the panel?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.